The French Revolution, from rebellion to radical revolution. Let's review the causes of the revolution. Remember that France was ruled by an absolute monarch who didn't really have any connection or sympathy for the people. France was experiencing high levels of debt caused by their involvement in wars, including their support for the colonists in the American Revolution. The people of France were experiencing food shortages and miserable living conditions, and they had an unfair and complicated tax system. The revolution begins. In 1789, King Louis XVI convened the Estates General. He didn't really have any intent in reforming the political structure, but this is the first time since 1614 that he had called this assembly together where each of the estates was represented. Now, voting in the Estates General was unfair because each estate received just one vote rather than them getting votes that were proportionate to the population. So the first estate, which was the smallest, had one vote. The second estate had one vote. And then all of those people in the third estate, well, they only had one vote as well. So the wealthy, privileged, not tax-paying people of the first and second estates would always be able to outvote the third estate where they were paying all the taxes. The third estate refused to vote. They didn't participate really in this convention, and they chose instead to form a national assembly. And when they were locked out of their meeting rooms and refused the opportunity to be continued, when they were refused the opportunity to continue working, then they went to an indoor tennis court that was nearby, and they swore an oath to show their determination to stick together until they had the opportunity to write a new constitution. At the same time that this is happening politically, people in France are getting more and more upset to the point that they stormed the Bastille, which was a prison and an armory, and they set the prisoners there free and collected the weapons that were stored there. And the storming of the Bastille is considered the real beginning of the French Revolution. And this gives power to that third estate in the National Assembly at the expense of the monarchy and the nobility. In the early revolution, there's a period of time called the Great Fear. It's characterized by peasant rebellions. France's neighbors, especially Austria and Prussia, are concerned that the revolution is going to spill over into their countries, so they begin to mobilize, and people form local militias within France for their own protection. It's also when the document known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen was written by the National Assembly. It granted basic liberties to the people. It created tax reforms, and it adopted this motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity or brotherhood. And then bread riots break out because the food shortages are continuing, and this is the event that actually forces the king to accept the National Assembly and the Declaration. And at this point, the king and his family are actually held almost as prisoners in Paris because the people want them to be held accountable and they don't want them to be able to flee the country. More changes that are occurring in this time period are church reforms. The church land was seized and sold for profit to help with the economic distress, and the civil constitution of the clergy was passed to put the church under government control so that the members of the clergy couldn't just do whatever they pleased to the people. The Constitution of 1791 was adopted, which officially limited the power of the monarch, and it created a legislative assembly to make laws. Now, despite all these reforms, there are a number of people who are opposed to what's happening. Catholic priests and nobles, obviously, because they're losing power, but also peasants and radicals because they weren't experiencing enough change to give relief to some of the terrible conditions that they were experiencing. And then more problems emerge. The king and his family tried to flee the nation, but were captured. war did eventually spread to the surrounding nations. People of the First and Second Estates who were worried for their safety were fleeing France, and the countries that they were entering were afraid that the French would attack them. And so this takes the revolution from a civil war to an international war. And then the Paris Commune comes to power and radicalizes the revolution. This period is characterized by mobs attacking the royal palace and the legislative assembly. There's a national convention chosen by all white males. Universal male suffrage was in play there, so that the National Convention could make new laws for the nation. And the goal of the Paris Commune and the National Convention was to abolish the monarchy entirely and to establish a republic or a representative government. This is the beginning of the Radical Revolution in a period known as the Reign of Terror. By 1793, the Jacobins are in control of the Radical Revolution, and they execute King Louis XVI for treason. But within this movement, there's a power struggle because there are different factions of the Jacobins who are fighting for control. And externally, France is under attack and is going to have to go to war with countries like Austria and Britain, who are concerned about what's happening in France. And the Committee of Public Safety is formed. Eventually, a man named Robespierre is going to be in charge of it, and he says that he will lead France to a republic of virtue once this crisis has passed. But until then, it's the job of the Committee of Public Safety to make sure that people opposed to the revolution are eliminated. So in this time period, about 40,000 people are executed. 16,000 of those are executed by guillotine, including the Queen, Marie Antoinette. So the way that the Committee of Public Safety is dealing with opposition is simply to get rid of those people. The Reign of Terror brings about some interesting outcomes in terms of the reforms that the French were hoping to achieve. Slavery is abolished in the colonies. Price limits are set, which sort of improve their economic problems. There's more equality in society. The Reign of Terror and the Committee for Public Safety went a long way in targeting the Catholic Church and de-Christianizing French society. They changed the names of things that referenced Christian ideals. They made it very difficult for people to worship for a time, and they also emphasized the buildup of the military. But eventually, even the people of France realize that this is an extreme reaction, and they arrest and try Robespierre, and he is executed by the National Convention, sort of in the same spirit that he was trying to execute all these opponents of the revolution. So that's how we get to the end of the Reign of Terror. And once the Reign of Terror ends, the new group in place in France is called the Directory. By 1795, France had another new constitution, and a legislative assembly had been created. And the Directory makes reference to the executive committee that was formed to rule the Republic. The period of time where the Directory is in control is known as a time of corruption. They relied on the military for power, and at the end of this period, France will come under the leadership of an emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. Thanks for listening. If you need to rewind or rewatch any of this video, please feel free to do so.